Hello, Kidney Warriors! James here from Dadvice TV, your online kidney health coach, and this is Dadvice TV Live. Now, for those of you that are new, go ahead and introduce yourselves, and welcome to Dadvice TV. Great to have you here. We have a great community, very supportive, very positive, very helpful. And let me introduce myself. My name is James. I created Dadvice TV about 2.5 years ago when I suddenly found out that I have kidney problems. And I just didn't have problems. I had kidney failure. GFR8. Was not happy with that. I was in the ICU for a week. But now, 2.5 years later, I feel great. I've used diet and lifestyle changes to start exercising, get my blood pressure under control, start living a healthier life, started learning about nutrition and how important all that is, which has helped me make better choices when I eat, and it's improved my overall health. And along with my overall health was my kidney health. My last GFR test was in the 30s, putting me at stage 3, but more importantly, I do not have a single symptom. Kidney disease is not holding me back. I like to say I've kicked kidney disease to the curb. Now tonight, we're going to talk about electrolytes. And a lot of times, you guys, when you think of electrolytes, you're thinking sodium, potassium, phosphorus. Now those are things we got to watch with kidney disease, and those are important minerals that we need, but there's even more. Now to talk about it, because I'm not an expert, we have back with us renal dietitian Jen Hernandez. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, James. Hey, everybody. So good to be back on another Tuesday night with you, talking all about minerals tonight and electrolytes. So very excited to be here.
Now, for those that don't know you, how do they get a hold of you and how do they join your amazing Plant-Powered Kidneys Facebook group?
So you can read up on all kinds of information on my website, which is plantpoweredkidneys.com. I do have a blog there with a ton of articles. We put out a new article every week to discuss information about kidney nutrition for you and share with you the evidence-based research that is there to support or advise against certain recommendations when it comes to kidney nutrition. So you can find a lot of information on our website, plantpoweredkidneys.com. You can also find us, as James mentioned, on Facebook. Just look up for the group Plant Powered Kidneys. It is free to join. It is a private group, and I do require that you answer questions to be admitted. I want to protect you, and I want to protect all of our members, over 3,500 people in that group so far.
Woohoo!
And I want to take care of everybody. So I do require questions be answered so that we keep those bots and the problem causers outside of the group and keep the group positive, informative, and supportive. And it is such a wonderful group. I love going in every day and just scrolling through the feed, looking at all these delicious recipes that people post, what they're cooking. It's so wonderful, and it is so motivational and inspiring. So if you want to join us there, feel free. Just look us up on Facebook.
Yeah, and for anyone who's worried, what to eat? Oh, it looks like I'm limited, really, really limited. No, you're not. And if you go into the Plant Powered Kidneys Facebook group, you're going to see all sorts of recipes, things that people do to change it up, add some variety, add some new flavors. And it is just a gold mine of ideas to help you enjoy eating while still thinking of your kidneys and being healthy.
Exactly.
Now, today, we're going to be talking about minerals and electrolytes. Now, are minerals and electrolytes the same thing? Is that word interchangeable?
It's pretty much interchangeable. If you think about electrolytes, you think about the sports drinks that are so common. It's
Mm-hmm.
basically a recipe of all of these things about potassium and sodium, all these other little components that our body needs, especially to maintain hydration. That's where the electrolyte term comes in. And then minerals is that term that we really partner with the idea of vitamins. You think vitamins and minerals, the things that we don't really think about that we need, but our body really does need. So using both of these terms is really helpful in people understanding that they're essentially the same thing. Potassium is electrolyte and a mineral, and the way that it helps us does include fluid management as well.
Well, that is good to know because I've always used them interchangeably. And I started thinking for tonight's show, I was like, oh, am I doing it right or am I doing it wrong? So that's good to hear. I can
Yeah.
use the terms interchangeably. I like electrolytes because I grew up watching the sports drink commercials and I've heard electrolytes plus the movie Idiocracy. Great comedy movie back in the day. And they talk about electrolytes. Not in the right way, but to them, what electrolytes are, it's what your body needs.
Oh, that's
Now,
great.
how do I know, as somebody with kidney disease, if I need some minerals or electrolytes, if I'm low?
So the first thing that really you'll need to have is a test. So you get your labs drawn for a variety of reasons, and you can get a micronutrient, which is this essentially this umbrella term for vitamins, minerals, electrolytes, and you can have this evaluated to see if you have these nutrients that are out of range. Because the last thing we want to do is one, add pills to something if we don't need them, and two, we don't want to cause problems where there are no problems to begin with. So you want to make sure that you assess with your doctor, with your medical team, assess if you need to have any kind of supplements by getting this testing done. So that is going to be the first thing to find out. This is not something that you can self-diagnose. You may be able, depending on your state, depending on your access to labs, you may be able to get a micronutrient test without a doctor's order, but many places do require a doctor's order. So, and with getting it through the doctor, you can have it most likely covered under your health care. So, I always recommend just ask your doctor for it, ask them to check off to get the micronutrient testing. And that is a great way to not only get the results for yourself, but then you have your medical team that's also aware of those results. And they're going to be able to provide you with more recommendations based on what you get from those, from that test.
Now, you had mentioned earlier about fluid management is
Mhm,
connected to electrolytes. So if I
mhm.
was going to get tests, I always, at least for my kidney labs, I always make sure I'm properly hydrated. I'm not sitting there trying to drink a whole bunch of water 10 minutes
Mhm.
before I get my labs because, guys, it's just going to sit in your stomach. It isn't going to make it into your system. We need to kind of stay hydrated. Do I need to worry about being hydrated also with electrolytes? If I dehydrated some, does that throw those off?
It can if you have a significant swing in your hydration status. One of the nutrients that we're most commonly familiar with is sodium, and that can be swayed with big changes in your fluid. We've talked about fluid and fluid restrictions before, and we've also talked about lab tests and looking at your lab results as well. And that sodium is a great indicator of how your fluid balance is. And the way that I explain it to a lot of my clients is think of when you make Kool-Aid, which I know a lot of us have, or we grew up having Kool-Aid, our parents taught us how to make it. Basically, you have a packet with the right amount of water, and there's this ratio that's required. Otherwise, you're going to have a really sad tasting Kool-Aid or a really powerful tasting Kool-Aid, depending on how much water you put in there. And that's really what that think of those minerals, think of those electrolytes as that packet that's balanced in the right amount of water. So if you have too much water in there, it's going to dilute it. If you don't have enough water, it's going to concentrate it and show that you do not have enough water. So that's what we're looking at with the electrolyte balance when it comes to your own hydration status.
Awesome. Great. So let's jump into the common minerals because we got a lot of stuff to cover tonight. One
Mhm.
that I hear a lot, there's a lot of promotion going on in the kidney community is magnesium. What can you tell us about magnesium and why does it matter to kidney patients?
Well, frankly, I think it matters because we hear so much about it that people get really hyped up over it. But it's really important for our DNA production. It's important for our muscles. It's important for our heart function and for even nerve and energy production and communication. It is also seen as something that's supposed to help with a calming effect. So you might see a lot of these types of calming supplements that promote having magnesium as the number one ingredient or the top active ingredient, so to say. But the evidence around this as being something that's calming is really not strong right now. So you want to take that with a grain of salt because just taking it, is it a placebo effect? Is it something that you just thought would help and you're really jazzed with this new supplement and that helped you feel better because you felt like you were more in control about the situation or about your problem? Is that really what's happening? The thing that I really want to stress about magnesium is with declining kidney function, there's a risk for higher levels of magnesium. And that is because of the decreased function of the kidneys to get rid of the excess nutrient. So if you have lower kidney function, it's really, really important that you get your magnesium levels tested. In fact, for people on dialysis, they get their magnesium levels tested monthly, quarterly at least, to make sure that their magnesium levels are in line. Many people who have late stage kidney disease, they might need to get their magnesium levels checked as well to make sure it's not building up in the body in that situation. So it is very, very important to be aware of what your levels are and see if you need to supplement it. If you have a concern about wanting to be calm, if you're having some kind of anxiety, you guys know I'm a really big fan of getting to more of the root cause of what's going on and treating that rather than having something cover it up. So if you need to see professional help to help with anxiety or stress, to help with calming techniques, that's going to be really, really helpful. And it's not going to be another pill that you need to take. That being said, some people do need to have a magnesium supplement because of low magnesium levels. Again, everybody is different. This is definitely not an exception when it comes to kidney disease because every single kidney disease is different. It's like a fingerprint. Your
Mm-hmm.
kidney disease is very different from anybody else's. So, in some cases, some people need a magnesium supplement, and levels should still be tested and tracked.
Great. Now, if I, say my magnesium is just a little bit low and I don't want to go
Mhm.
for a supplement, what
Mhm.
foods could I add to my diet that may help me get that magnesium?
So, great sources of magnesium come from nuts and seeds, as well as dark leafy greens. So, one of the best sources of magnesium is pumpkin seeds or pepitas. And those have 156 milligrams per serving, which is a really fantastic amount to have because it will cover you in, I believe, I'll have to double check, it'll cover you in over 25% of the recommended dietary allowance.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. And a lot of these things seem small when it comes to the amount of this micronutrient, but if we're looking through days and weeks of our eating habits, our body will work to collect it as we eat it. So our body's really good about regulating this, and if we need it, it'll keep it. The challenge again goes into if you have kidney disease, you don't need to have too much of it because it might be harder to get rid of it. So, nuts and seeds are a fantastic source, dark leafy greens as well, even rice and beans. Black beans are a great source, and brown rice is a great source as well. So, following a plant based diet, you're not generally going to have an issue with magnesium. But if you do, like you said, James, then it's easy to
Mhm.
just bump up a little, like an extra serving of nuts, an extra bit of almonds with your snack or with your meal, whatever you like.
And nuts are something that I love to sprinkle into like a salad, even stir
Hmm.
fry. You don't have to eat very much. As a matter of fact, when you're talking pumpkin seeds and that 156 milligrams, I just looked at here, that's only an ounce. That's not, that's not a
Right.
whole ton of pumpkin seeds. And you could
Exactly.
easily add that to a salad or a meal, or if you're
Hmm.
making some quinoa or something,
Hmm.
chia seeds. My wife loves chia seeds.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
great.
Remember the yogurt bark that we talked about months ago?
Yes, yes, I made some of it. I bought
Oh,
a
yeah.
gigantic tub of yogurt and I put cherries and chia seeds and almonds, sliced almonds, all sorts of stuff in there.
Yeah, that's a great way to add that extra texture, add that extra crunch. And again, a little goes a long way. Think of nuts and seeds like a garnish for your dishes, just like James was saying. It's not something you have to sit down to a bowl full or even a
Hmm.
handful of. In fact, that's something that nuts and seeds, if you can easily go overboard if you
Yep.
try to consume it as a main portion of your meal. It's really not intended for that. It's meant to be a part of your diet.
Yep. Great. Now with magnesium, if I'm taking that as a supplement, do I need to worry about any drug interactions? Is this one of those ones that is something I got to keep an eye on?
It does have interaction with several drugs. Diuretics and proton pump inhibitors or PPIs are some of the most common ones, especially for people with CKD or other health issues related to that. That's definitely something you want to be aware of. So when you're on medications, this is again, this is not something to say that the food you need to worry about. This is where we go back to the supplements that you want to pay attention to because certain diuretics will eliminate extra nutrients and some of them will keep them. So you really, really, again, want to discuss any kind of supplement with your doctor, with your dietitian to make sure that you are taking the right thing and that you're not thinking that you're solving one problem, but causing three other
Oh,
issues to pop up.
I when I go into message boards, oh my goodness, I feel bad because I see that over and over. People are just randomly like, "Oh yeah, I'm now taking this."
Hmm.
They didn't ask their doctor. They didn't ask their dietitian. They're just copying what somebody else did or they read it somewhere. And I
Yeah.
know in my heart, I know you're trying to help yourself, but you're not. And you could even be accelerating the damage.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
I've had clients where I just our very first session, I go through and we literally I tell them you're going to push all those supplements aside. Don't throw them away. I'm going to say, but put them all aside. We're starting with a clean slate now, and we need to reevaluate each of these to see if they're appropriate for you. And it can be nice to one take off a lot of those medications,
oh yeah.
uh, but also just to kind of get back to focusing on the food. And it seems like it can be overwhelming thinking of getting enough of these nutrients from food, but trust me, you guys, it adds up easily.
Hmm.
There's a risk, the specifically here, magnesium deficiency is not a common situation. Again, in fact, for later CKD, it's more of the risk of having too much. So
Hmm.
that's again where you just want to be careful with what you're supplementing.
Yep. And always let your doctors and your healthcare team know everything that you're taking. And if you want to add
Hmm.
something, check with them first. Now,
Exactly.
why what is why is it important to have magnesium or keep an eye on our magnesium if we have kidney disease? You've kind of touched on a few of the those points so far, but can we kind of wrap up? Hey, here's
Yeah.
magnesium and kidney disease.
So as I mentioned, higher levels of magnesium are often connected with the later stages of kidney disease. Lower levels of magnesium are also associated with a higher risk of progression towards chronic kidney disease. So either way, it can affect kidney health, but depending on your stage, depending on where you're at, that's going to start to give a little insight as to if you should be focusing on this on one side or the other. So that's going to be something that is important to know when it comes to kidney disease. Supplementation of magnesium can be helpful for heart protection and preventing heart disease. But there's more studies that are really needed for this. So we can't just come out and say everybody should be taking this. In fact, we've talked about it before. Those renal vitamins like pro-renal, those that's a great place for you to kind of get an idea of how important these micronutrients are. If it's not listed there, there's not enough evidence to widespread encourage it for the renal community. So magnesium is not one of those things that is listed there because it is not something that is encouraged.
I just checked. It is not, the
It's not
print
there.
is very small. I got a giant bottle, but you are correct. It is not on the list of
Hmm.
Pro-Renal plus D. Kind of,
Hmm.
yeah, there we go. That's the renal multivitamin I take. I love it. 2 of those tablets every day. I've
Hmm.
got a good starting point. Plus, I'm eating right? Lots of plants.
Exactly.
All right, our next one, and this is one that, oh my goodness, is very, very important. Iron.
Yes.
And I know some of the side effects of being low on iron because I was when I was diagnosed.
Yes. So iron is really, really important in the production of red blood cells. And red blood cells are very important in getting oxygen to our organs, including our kidneys. And this is something that I talk about all the time with clients. We really want to focus on preventing a decline in oxygen getting to the kidneys, because how can we do our own work without oxygen? We need to breathe. Our kidneys need the oxygen for them to work. So this is really, really important. This is also important as a nutrient for growth and even neurological development. And some hormones do use iron as well. So there are two types of iron in our diet. There's heme iron and non-heme iron. Heme iron is the kind that is found in animal products, and non-heme iron is found in plant products. Now, the difference, really the main difference between these are the absorption. So heme iron is better absorbed. So that's in part where sometimes people are encouraged to eat animal proteins because of the heme iron that they get from those animal products. This is again why not everybody should go on an entirely plant-based diet, because in some cases it might be helpful to include animal proteins. But again, it goes back to the individual. The non-heme iron that comes from plant products is still a viable type of iron. It's just not absorbed as much. So that is something to consider when you're doing a more plant-focused diet or a plant-based diet, to think about other resources that we have to help with our iron levels. So using a cast iron skillet, using cast iron cooking equipment can help. Yeah.
Now, it's amazing how much of a difference that can make. It's not a ton of iron, but all of a sudden you're infusing a little bit of extra iron into everything you make.
Exactly. And James, have you heard about the lucky iron fish?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I got one because I got really bad at cleaning my cast iron skillets, and I would just go to the store and buy a new one.
Oh my gosh.
And now I have like, I don't know, 500 pounds of rusty skillets now.
Well, they can be salvaged. They can be salvaged, I promise.
I've read the instructions on how to clean them and season them.
Yep. Yeah. Well, for those that don't know, we've done a talk about anemia before. We've talked about this stuff, and we'll probably do another one to kind of refresh about that information. But lucky iron fish is a iron fish that you literally drop into your cooking, and it diffuses iron into your food. So it increases the content of iron there. And I recommend it to a lot of my clients, and it's been really, really helpful to support the iron in their diet. So the other thing that I wanted to comment on about the different kinds is the plant-based sources have other nutrients which are really great for us, but they can prevent the absorption of iron. So that's another reason why it's important to make sure that you're getting different varieties and you're doing those alternate methods of cooking to get more iron into your system, because that's going to just further help support that. So for example, spinach has polyphenols, and these are really, really important nutrients. They have a lot of antioxidants, but they prevent iron absorption. Another thing to keep in mind is calcium. Calcium is essentially competing with iron for absorption. So it can block. If you're having calcium with an iron-rich meal, it can block the absorption. And then one last tip, since this is such a big topic, is vitamin C. So foods that have vitamin C will help iron absorption. So think about your pretty colors of your bell peppers, which have vitamin C, and some of your citrus, things like that, that can help with the absorption. So try doing that as well to help with that plant-based iron absorption.
And I'll tell you, that absorption is really important. I was not aware of that, and I suffered from some pretty severe anemia, and my doctors had me on certain nutrients, iron being one of them, they wanted me to get, and certain B vitamins. And I had to take those with some vitamin C, just a little bit. Didn't have to take it with a
Hmm.
lot. That way I could absorb it. And I was like, no milk, no dairy, no calcium stuff. Because my goal was, can I eat myself out of anemia, or at
Right.
least better, instead of getting pills and injections? And I
Yeah.
was. It took a bit of time. It took me about
Hmm.
3 or 4 months, but I was, as I kept getting healthier and, finally learning how important nutrients and adding plants and less processed foods were. Now,
Hmm.
speaking of foods, what foods are good in iron?
So this is another great thing. Again, animal and plants, we do have iron sources in both of those. So for the animal products, you're looking at things like chicken and tuna. You're looking at red meats. Then you're also looking on the plant side. Remember last time we talked about those fortified cereals? They're fortified in these nutrients as well. So the fortified cereals have these nutrients. There's also beans and lentils and tofu and spinach and even chocolate, which can fit, despite what a lot of people think, can fit into a kidney friendly diet. So it's not something that you have to avoid. It's just something that you need to know about.
Exactly. It's all about portion control. You,
Yes.
you, you can't eat the gigantic solid Easter bunny, but you
No,
can have one of those little hollow ones occasionally as a treat.
exactly.
All right. What about, and this is one that I am completely uninformed on, copper.
So copper is something that, uh, well, it does help with iron absorption. So it's part of this whole anemia concept. But before we dive too much into it, just so you guys know, deficiency and toxicity are too much of it. Very, very rare in the US. Supplements are not highly focused on when it comes to copper. So it's not something that you need to be running out and getting right away. In fact, it does in the pro renal, they do include a little bit of copper as part of that supplement to help facilitate with prevention of anemia, to help with the iron and taking care of our immune support as well. So, copper is something that is important, but not something you need to go running out to go get any kind of supplements of. A lot of our food, plant and animal, do have sources of copper in there. So it's quite easy to get enough copper in the diet. And again, a deficiency or a toxicity or too much, it's very, very rare, very unheard of. And just like you said, James, not very familiar with copper, so we're not thinking about it. So this is something where if you're not thinking too much about it, don't think too hard about it now.
Now, what are some foods that I could eat that will take care of my copper needs, or help with them?
So this is another one that has plant and animal sources. Oysters have a ton of copper in them, like over 1,400 micrograms. Mushrooms have a lot of copper in them, as well as chocolate again. Tofu, avocado is a source.
Oh,
Millet, which
yeah.
is a type of grain, yeah. And let's see, crab as well. That is another one type of food, animal food that has copper in it. So again, variety. These aren't foods that we've never heard of. Maybe some of them you're like, I'm not going to eat crab every day. You don't need to, because we talked about cashews and avocado and grains and tofu, other things, mushrooms that you can eat more frequently, and your body will take care and manage that storage of your nutrients.
And for those that are new, you may be hearing some foods that you're like, holy cow, wait, what do you
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
I can eat those with kidney disease? Yes. Avocado is one of my favorite things to add to a salad or to some kind of mix. I don't eat a ton of avocado, but I have it on a regular basis. I just kind of keep an eye on it and keep an eye on my potassium and other levels. So you can have
Exactly.
a lot of these foods that you may be thinking like, what the heck are they talking about? I read something on a Facebook group that said no. They're wrong.
Yes. Yes. And the renal diet, the old concept of the renal diet, just push it out the window, just get it out of your mind, because there is so much information that is coming up more and more every day, every year, that we're looking at how the plant-based diet is really, really helpful for kidney disease. And It's really wonderful in the fact that we can talk about all of these foods that we used to think of. And also even myself, even when I was a dietitian working in dialysis, and I just absolutely hated it when I had to tell somebody no avocado. But I'd rather have the conversation of how much avocado would you like to have, or how much avocado can we negotiate in a sense, and that way you can enjoy it. But I just don't want to see you suffer from the complications that come from too much potassium in this example.
Yep. Now, why is copper important for kidney disease? I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but I wanted to inject that part in there because we mentioned avocado and
Yeah.
a few items that I knew there's going to be some new people thinking like, wait, you can't eat those. Yes, you can.
Well, the reason, again, that we focus on the importance of copper, especially related to CKD, is the fact that it's part of this prevention of anemia, and it's part of helping your kidneys get enough oxygen. So that's why it's important with kidney disease, because anemia is so common, it's so prevalent with CKD. But it's important to know, again, that you don't need to go running out and buying a copper supplement. You can talk with your doctor if a renal multivitamin, again, like ProRenal. By the way, this is not sponsored by ProRenal.
Nope.
This is just one of the multivitamins that I recommend quite often, and it does have a small amount of copper in it to help with that anemia prevention. So if you feel like with talking with your doctor that you need some support there, looking at a renal multivitamin will help give you a little bit extra, but there's no concern for the most case that you need to run out and be loading up on copper.
All right. How about, and I may pronounce this wrong, selenium?
Selenium, you got
Yeah.
it. So, selenium is very important for thyroid hormone metabolism. It also is part of DNA synthesis, and it has a lot of antioxidants. So, it is really, really helpful and supportive of a healthy body. The selenium itself can be found and added very easily into the diet. In fact, I'm going to give you a tip on the one food that you can have one piece of and get your entire day's worth of selenium. But it's
Ooh.
just so, yeah, it is very, very easy to have enough selenium in the diet. And it's not something that we worry about a deficiency. Again, this is not very common, but this might be something that you didn't realize that you could have, or that you could even just do a little bit of. So, with selenium, here's the secret: you just need to have one Brazil nut per day, and that's all the selenium that you need. So, if you're
Easy.
familiar with, yeah, exactly. So, Brazil nuts, if you're not familiar, if you ever get a trail mix, it's that largest
Mhm.
nut that you see in the trail mix. So, there's not very many of them there. Sometimes there are, I guess, but there's not very many. You just need one, and you get the selenium that you need for the entire day. So that's something that sometimes I've talked with clients about, just to make sure that they're getting enough to help with antioxidants, and again, to help with that hormone metabolism as well. So besides Brazil nuts, you can also find it in animal products as well. So halibut and ham. But then there's plant products, so enriched grains like macaroni and brown rice, and then even baked beans have selenium in them as well.
Awesome. And any concerns about drug interactions with selenium?
There's not too much of common medications. There is a certain kind of medication called cisplatin, which is associated for cancer treatment, that there might be an interaction there. But again, that's not a very common medication. It's something that you would want to talk with your doctor about if you had a concern. But in general, it's not going to have an effect related to selenium.
Great. Now, since I only need a little bit, what happens if I get too much? If I eat a whole bunch of Brazil nuts, I'm just crazy for them.
If you get too much, you might get an upset stomach. You might not want to leave the bathroom. You just might not feel good, and you won't want to leave. But the other thing that is pretty interesting if you have too much is you might get a strong type, like garlic type breath, and you might experience a metallic taste. So the
Ooh.
other symptoms could be hair and nail loss, or nail brittleness if your nails are getting kind of brittle. So this is something that you, again, you don't need to go really out of your way to include, because there are foods that you can have in very small amounts. It's very, very easy to have this as part of your diet, but you don't need to stock up on a ton of Brazil nuts every day to get the benefits.
Great. And why is selenium important with kidney disease?
So, low selenium levels are actually common for people who are on hemodialysis. So, this is something that might help in dialysis. Again, you really want to talk with your healthcare team. And on dialysis, you have your nephrologist, you have your dialysis nurse, you have your dialysis dietitian, at least in the United States. And you can talk with them about this and see if you can get your levels checked to see if you need to maybe supplement with a little, like an extra Brazil nut a day. But with the more common low levels, especially on hemodialysis, it might not be a bad idea to have just one Brazil nut. Again, we're not looking for a crazy amount, but just
Hmm.
having one Brazil nut as part of some kind of one of your, daily ritual meal habits or snack habits.
All right. Now, the next one's an important one, but it's one that always gives me shivers. I also call it the sneaky snake because there's lots of forms of it in our food. You guys out there, what am I talking about? Write it in the
Yeah,
comments
right?
before I say it. I am, of course, talking about phosphorus, which we
Yes.
need some
Yes.
of, just not too much.
Yes. Yes. So phosphorus is a really, really important part of our bones. A lot of people associate calcium with our bones, but phosphorus is right there alongside with it. So our bones, our teeth, even our DNA and our RNA, which is another cousin of DNA, I'll say. It also helps with our cell structure, the walls. There's a term phospholipid you may or may not have heard of, but there's a phospholipid wall where the phosphorus is actually part of the cell structure. Our body uses phosphorus as one of the main energy sources. So phosphorus is actually very important for our body. The problem that comes into play with kidney disease is how we're getting our phosphorus and how the kidneys are able to manage the phosphorus as well. So most often, food that is rich in phosphorus is going to be one, obviously, those additives. We've talked about them before. That's the number one highest absorbed type of phosphorus that will contribute to a phosphorus load in our blood. There are other kinds that are still organic and associated with whole foods, but it includes animal products, including animal meats and milk, and then nuts, seeds, and grains of which are absorbed at the lowest rate. So we can see the different types of phosphorus. And when you look up nutrition information for a certain whole food, so I've mentioned the USDA food database is where we get a lot of our information for nutrition resources for you guys. That phosphorus content, for example, brown rice, is not going to tell you the amount absorbed. It's going to tell you the actual amount, the actual content of phosphorus that is in that item. So some foods that are seen as high in phosphorus don't translate to being high in phosphorus in our diet. But things like dairy, which about 80% is absorbed, and then meats, which is about 60% absorbed, can still be higher. And we don't always think about those being sources of phosphorus. So I know a lot of times grains get a bad rap and they think, oh, you can't do brown rice, you can't do whole wheat, you have to do white rice, you have to do white grains. That's the least of our concern when it comes to phosphorus because it's not absorbed nearly as much. So the sources of phosphorus that I oftentimes focus on are the dairies, which I think with the American diet, and James, you might have a little bit more of an opinion or comment on this too, but I think like the American diet is a little heavily swayed with dairy. I think,
Oh,
we think of like
yes.
cheese and milk. I mean, many of us grow up having milk with every meal, and some people carry that through their lifetime, having milk every single meal, where it's just not indicated as a necessity. So that's something to consider wherever you're getting your phosphorus from. I think dairy is one of those higher culprits.
And in the United States, we really don't see, especially with kidney patients, phosphorus deficiencies.
Right.
because it's
Right.
everywhere.
It's everywhere, and our body does a great job storing it. So it comes into our system and it gets locked and loaded into our bones. That is something that our body will take care of. And in fact, with kidney disease, that almost goes into overdrive, that type
Mhm.
of balancing, and that's oftentimes where we can have that imbalance of phosphorus.
Yeah, and since we really don't have to worry about it, let's jump to our next one, calcium.
Yes. So calcium is the most abundant mineral in the body. So we talked about phosphorus being really important. Calcium is just a little bit higher than that. It is where it's stored in our bones. It helps with blood vessel contraction and dilation, so controlling our blood vessels. It also helps with muscle function and nerve signaling, things that we don't really associate calcium with because we've always grown up thinking about how calcium is good for our bones, which it
Mm-hmm.
is, but there's a lot of other roles that it takes on. And it's pretty crazy to think that only 1% of the calcium in our body takes care of all of this. The rest of the calcium, that 99%, is stored in our bones. So only 1% is dispatched to go take care of all of this stuff in our body.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? I mean,
Yeah.
we know that it's stored in our bones, but to think that just 1% is out there doing all of this stuff for us to keep us alive.
Now, what are some good sources of calcium?
So we really, as we talked about, we know dairy is a source of calcium, and that's where you're going to find it in your dairy products. But you can also find it in plant-based products. So a lot of companies like orange juices often fortify with calcium. That's another one of those things that people associate with, I can't have this with kidney issues, but you might be able to if you talk with your team and find a way to fit it into your diet. So, calcium fortified orange juice is one. Soy milk, also fortified. Tofu is a good source of calcium as well, as are chia seeds. So, you do have plant based options that include calcium.
Awesome. That makes it so easy, especially like those chia seeds. Now I know why my
Hmm.
wife puts them on everything she eats. I should start doing that
Yes.
because it looks easy to mix in. I
Oh.
occasionally put it in my stir fry when I remember it. Just
I
sprinkle a
love
few.
tossing it into smoothies. I'm excited for warm
That's
weather
what
where I
she
can go back to
does.
having smoothies.
Yes, things are now getting affordable here as we're getting closer to the right
Yes.
time of year for all the fresh fruits and stuff. Now,
Oh, yeah.
why is calcium important with kidney disease?
Yeah, this is a loaded question, and we could do probably an entire show all about this idea. But calcium is associated with kidneys because of what is called our parathyroid. So, most people are familiar with the thyroid. The parathyroid is a gland that sits on top of your thyroid, and this creates parathyroid hormone. This hormone, its sole purpose in life is to balance your calcium levels. However, with kidney disease, there becomes this miscommunication, this imbalance where the hormone thinks that there's not enough calcium. And in many cases, that can be true. There are people that can have lower calcium levels. But again, this goes into a lot more of a discussion, and sometimes it's not always true. So don't try to self diagnose with this. But this whole balancing of the calcium really gets off kilter, I'll say. It just gets kind of offset when it comes down to the calcium balance with kidney disease. And it really comes down to this miscommunication. The hormone thinks there's not enough calcium, so it tries to pull in more. If it can't take in more, it goes to the bones. And that's where people can get what's called renal osteodystrophy, which is essentially weakening of the bones. This can also happen with high phosphorus levels that can also trigger this whole cascade of bone imbalance. So that's why some people might talk about having achy joints with high phosphorus or with high parathyroid hormone. This all goes back to that whole connection and that whole conversation. So it's very, very important that you discuss with your doctor about this situation for yourself, because even though we think of calcium as maybe being off kilter, it might not actually be the case. So it's a very, very important conversation. And your doctor, your renal nephrologist is aware of this and will be tracking it. So that is what is important to, this is one of these big issues that you don't want to try to self-diagnose or fix it yourself. You want to have a good conversation with your doctor about this whole thing, because hyperparathyroidism can get way out of control and can lead to surgery if it's not managed early on.
Oh, yeah, very good to know. What about zinc?
So zinc is another part of, well, we all think of it as this idea of immune boosting or immune support. It really
Yep.
helps with our immune function, but it also helps with protein synthesis and wound healing. Very important there, as well as DNA synthesis. So zinc has a lot of very important interactions and a lot of important jobs in the body. Sometimes supplementation is recommended, but only in certain cases, not always, not all the time, and not guaranteed. But it is something that is helpful, and you can find it in the prorenal vitamin, that they do include some zinc there.
Yeah, and there's not a lot in there, so it looks like we really don't need that much.
No, it's not something that you need to go overboard with. Again, if you have any kind of issues or possible deficiencies with zinc, that's something that you want to talk with your healthcare team about, because you can have a deficiency that leads to hair loss, it leads to even weight loss, hormone imbalances, the poor wound healing, taste abnormalities. I've had patients before who have had, they express there's a different kind of taste in their mouth. And that's sometimes we talk about the renal vitamin, not a zinc supplement, but like pro-renal, something like that, to help make sure they're getting enough zinc in their diet. But again, zinc is something that is found in plants and animal products. So it's very abundant in our diet, so long as we're eating a rounded diet.
Now, I'm going to kind of jump ahead because we are getting close to the top of the hour. We have three
Oh,
more
goodness.
important ones to cover. So I'm going to jump to a big one, potassium.
Yes. I love potassium, you guys. I could talk about potassium all the time. I feel like potassium is the forgotten middle child. I'm sorry to all middle children out there. I'm the oldest, so but I just, poor potassium just doesn't get the right kind of attention, and everybody is so scared of potassium. But potassium is an important part of our body. It helps with the fluid balance, it helps with nerve contraction, muscle contraction, and one of our most important muscles, arguably, is the heart. It helps with our heartbeat and our heart rhythm. So potassium serves a lot of important roles, and it just seems like potassium is still something that everybody is very scared about, when they really shouldn't be. Just because you have kidney health problems, kidney disease, whatever the case is, don't automatically assume to drop everything with potassium in it, because potassium does so much, and having too little is just as bad as having too much. And that includes cardiac arrest, which is the cause of death for people with potassium imbalances.
Yeah, I think so many people, when they first get diagnosed, they look at, it's common to have high potassium or difficulty controlling potassium, phosphorus, and sodium, and they just want to remove it from their diet, which is not the right thing. We need to just keep an eye on it, and it is possible. When I first got diagnosed, I went too low on one of them, sodium, which we're getting ready to talk about after this. And I started having problems, nerve issues. And the doctor did labs. He's like, how much sodium are you getting? You're way too low. And I did not realize that too little can be just as bad or even worse than getting too much.
Exactly. Our body still needs these nutrients. So it's important to make sure that you understand where you should fall in this range, or what your goal should be, because 0 doesn't equal success. 0 is not going to give you the nutrients that your body needs. And if your heart can't beat, then what's there to it, right? That's it.
Yeah, and your blood pressure, guys, that's what powers your kidneys. Your kidneys, really, there's nothing giving them power. They need your heart pumping to push the blood through for the filters to work, to pull out fluid, to pull out certain excess nutrients, and then some of them to get reabsorbed back in. All that is powered by your heart. Your heart powers your kidneys. And if we're not giving our heart what it needs and it's not pumping right, our kidneys are not working right.
Exactly. And potassium.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, not having enough potassium can actually lead to higher blood pressure. So cutting down on potassium is not the answer in all cases to help kidney function. In many cases, it's important to get enough potassium to help keep your blood pressure regulated so that your kidneys stay healthy.
Yeah, and for those that have been watching these videos for a while, you guys know that I am on a higher potassium diet than a traditional kidney patient would be, just because my body has trouble holding on to it. I take medication to hold on to it, plus I eat a higher level, and my potassium is still, it's within range, but it's right at that bottom edge every time. Now, if I have too high a potassium, what are the symptoms or the signs that I'm getting too much of it?
So too much potassium is often associated with muscle contractions, irregular muscle contractions or spasming. It can be also causing issues. I'm trying to think. High potassium is something that I don't personally have experience with, but I've had patients who've had symptoms. I remember one of my dialysis patients telling me he woke up one morning unable to get out of bed, physically get up out of bed. He was paralyzed, essentially. His muscles would not move, and his potassium levels were quite high. The other thing with potassium can be the heart contractions. You might have an irregular heartbeat, again, or cardiac arrest in many severe cases, that it just stops your heart, which can also happen with low potassium levels. And that's the thing with these symptoms, is that they can happen on really either end of the spectrum. So it's important to pay attention to that and be aware of the medications, which, as James said, there are medications that do interact with potassium, the type of diuretic you're on. There's some that get rid of potassium and there's some that keep potassium. So those are some of them. The ACE inhibitors or angiotensin blockers, those are the two most common types of medications that are prescribed, can also impact your potassium levels. So there's a lot of factors involved here, but when it comes to having potassium out of range, what I get worried most about is that cardiac arrest. That's something that I just absolutely, it terrifies me for my patients, the ones that have a hard time with controlling their potassium.
Yep. Now, how about sodium?
So sodium is another essential nutrient. This is something that zero is not success, as James had mentioned. It is intended to help with our fluid balance, but it also helps with nerve cell function and muscle contraction as well. So it is something that is important to include in the diet. The reason that so many practitioners and so many websites and companies come out and say low sodium diet is that the average American diet is well over the necessary amount of sodium. So that's why so many people say low sodium, low sodium, low sodium, because the average is very high in sodium. But it's not the no sodium diet. For example, beans. Beans need to have salt. I am not so cruel as to tell anybody to have beans with no salt in them. James and I have had this conversation.
I tried.
Exactly. It's not good, you guys. Don't do it. Don't do it to yourselves, please. There are other ways that you can reduce sodium in your diet, coming from fast foods we've talked about, reducing there. Some of the salty six we've talked about, which are the American Heart Association's highest, most salty foods, which includes breads, and even like burritos is up on the list, pizza as well. There are other places to pull back on sodium, but the thing is that it's not something to entirely avoid, because your body still needs it. So just focus on eliminating the processed foods. Be careful with how often you go out to eat. All of those other areas that are so high in sodium, just by taking care of that actually gives you a lot of freedom. And I've spoke with a lot of my clients who have gone plant-based and who don't eat out very often. We talk about how they can salt their food as much as they want.
Exactly. Once you get rid of all that processed food and fast food, you can have a lot of sodium.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, one of the tips that helped me cut down on sodium or to realize how much I was using was I went from a shaker, got rid of all the shakers, and went with a grinder. The
Yeah.
grinder's nice because I know I'm putting it on. I got to work for it. It doesn't just pour out when I tip it over. And I am shocked at how much sodium I can have now that
Mm-hmm.
I don't go and I get processed food. That one little tiny meal or something has 80% of my daily intake in it. Oh,
Isn't that the worst? And you're just like, oh my
yeah,
gosh, all of that in this little thing.
exactly. Something small and you got so much, like, how do they fit it in there? How do they
Yeah.
get that much sodium in there without it tasting like I'm just having a salt lick?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
yeah, perfect. Look at this. We did go over our hour. I was a little worried there.
You guys, we pack a lot of information into these. So I
Oh, yeah.
uh
Now, there is a blog post you created, which has what we've talked about and so much more on, oh, whoops. Let me bring you up all by yourself. Your website, I think, is right there on it. Oh, I don't have your website there.
well, it's plantpoweredkidneys.com.
Yes, it is in the description. There is a link to plantpoweredkidneys.com. Also, if you go to dadvicetv.com, all of Jen's videos are there. You can search, type in any term. It'll show all the videos that have that term, and every one of her videos down below has a link to the Plant Powered Kidneys Facebook group, plantpoweredkidneys.com website. And there is a very detailed, great blog with even more information, more foods that you can eat to get the different things. Also, before we go, a few people have been asking again about the Pro Renal Plus D multivitamin. Now, this is just one. Let me see if I can get it in focus. Yeah, Pro Renal Plus D is a multivitamin that I take. It is
Hmm.
recommended by the National Kidney Foundation, a lot of renal dietitians. Matter of fact, every single renal dietitian I've ever spoken to is aware of it and says, yeah, it's a good option. You can't run down to Walgreens or CVS and just grab a multivitamin off the shelf because you're going to get things that we don't need and too much of things that we
Right.
have trouble managing. So that one right there, there's a link on your website, right? To get
Yes,
this?
I do have, even in the blog, I think I have a link to a few of the resources where you can access and you can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it,
But
I
go
think.
buy it from Jen because there's a coupon code and it helps the people at Pro Renal Plus D, which are in Dayton, Ohio. They're like 35 minutes from my house. Great people. It helps them know that, hey, renal dietitians are still, you know, helping make people aware of Pro Renal Plus D. So go buy it from Jen. Use her coupon code. Or I think you have a coupon code, right?
Um, I had one. I'll need to find it. I'll find it and I'll add it if it's not there. Um, because I do have one, so I'll get it out there.
Yeah, and it's good to, Amazon's great. I shop there all the time. But let me tell you,
Hmm.
they're selling enough. Let's help the renal dietitians. They're the secret tool
Oh,
that every
oh
single
yeah.
kidney patient should be using to help them kick kidney disease to the curb. It's like we talk about this all the time. So many doctors, and they're starting to come around. They're slow to recommend a renal dietitian. And as you guys saw just from tonight, look at all this information you learned. Just from 1 hour sitting here listening to this. Imagine if you worked with a renal dietitian and they were looking at your labs. They could make
Exactly.
recommendations, unique to you to
Hmm.
help you. And a few people in the
Hmm.
comments asked a couple questions like, hey, how much of this should I take? We need your doctor needs to look at your labs. I can't tell you. Even if you show me labs, I can't tell you what you need to take.
Right.
They look at so many other things, and that's where a renal dietitian is your best weapon. All right. Anything you want to add before I wrap things up? Just in
Well,
case.
that was that was the final of our multi-part series. So 2 weeks ago we did the first talk about vitamins. Last week we did another talk. This
Mhm.
week was the final wrap up. So If you missed out on the past weeks for the other vitamin information, you guys, obviously it's a ton of information. Check out the videos, check out the articles, and let us know what you think, if this was helpful for you or not, or if you have other questions, and we'll keep coming out with more information for you.
Yep. And Jen and I will be back next Tuesday. I will be back tomorrow night with Dr. Butt. We're going to talk about emergency dialysis. That's where something goes wrong, your kidneys kind of start tanking, and you need some dialysis now. We're going to tell you what you need to know to be prepared and what to expect if that ever happened to you. So I'll see everybody. Yep, go ahead.
I was going to say, and next week we will be talking about keto diet, kidney disease, some new updates on that. So yeah, we're going to talk about keto and give you guys some new information in that forefront.
Oh, keto is always popular. My wife always mispronounces it keto. And I correct her like every other day. It's not keto, it's keto. All right, it's been great. Thank you, Jen, for being here. Always a pleasure. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye, y'all.